Alright, so we're gonna unpack the unit for American Revolution. So I know we've all broke it into different sections depending on the text and how it helps the kids better prepare for the end of the unit assessment. So let's start with George versus George.
Susan and I are the ones who did George versus George. And I feel like this one was really crucial to those sort of end of unit goals. When we get to the end of unit assessment, a lot of what their focus is on is sort of choosing a side, being able to defend which side was more justified, whether it was the Patriots or the Loyalists. And so the entirety of this book is focused on every section of it, from the viewpoints, the acts that led up to it, the type of government they had, the type of leadership. It shows you the British side, and then it shows you the American side through every single part of the book. It's a pretty lengthy book. It's also a pretty high level text. Most of it is read out loud to the kids, but every single section, you get the information on the British side, and then you get the information on the American side. So I feel like while it's kind of a complex text, it's going to be really beneficial to the end of unit goals, because it's going to give them that both sides have that viewpoint there.
Let's go to if you lived at the time of the American Revolution with Lee and Worsham.
So this is, I feel like, our anchor text. We spend a lot of time in this book. It kind of is very similar to George versus George, meaning that has both sides, but it's the Patriots versus the Loyalists. So there are some sections that would say, if you were a Loyalist, what did you do? If you were a Patriot, what did you do? What happened after the Declaration of Independence for Patriots? What happened for Loyalists? It also goes into a lot of detail about what clothes they wear, what kind of homes they lived in. You hit this text pretty much almost throughout the entire unit. We start with it, we kind of go back to it in the middle, and I think we end with it towards the end as well. I feel like it's a really good text, especially for those end of the unit assessments, like the debate and those sorts of things, being able to pick a side, whether they wanted to be with the Loyalists or the Patriots. Also liked this book too because it doesn't make the Loyalists out to be the bad guys. It shows that both sides had justified opinions on where they were standing.
And that's what also I kind of feel like is really good for helping to build their background knowledge, because it starts with the very beginning when the first colonists were coming over, and they were still very much in, they liked being under King George. They still considered themselves British colonists. They were just in America, and then you slowly see the problems that developed that led to the revolution. So it kind of builds that background knowledge along with letting them see both sides.
And that's what I say. I see in the notes that it talks about in Unit 3 of Social Studies, having taught this unit at this point in the year, they've already hit that in Social Studies. So hopefully that will help kind of with their content knowledge.
I think if this section also gives them a chance to kind of weigh the decision that they have to make at the very end. And in the beginning, when they do have a little background knowledge, but when they start to find out in this text that there was another side, and that it doesn't always have to be just one-sided. And I think that makes them, I thought that some of them right then are probably gonna decide whether they're neutral, wanna be neutral, which is gonna, if they have to make a decision at the end, that could possibly be an issue as to whether you make a decision or can you be neutral on a writing that says.
This one had a section on
The
about the people who were making it,
Yes.
so they didn't choose a side.
It had a section, and that's what I was wondering, at the end when it says you're going to choose which side had the best arguments. I know that some of them are probably going to say, can I be neutral? And so that's something that we would want to hit on, because you're going to have to make a choice.
Yes.
You can't be neutral.
You have to choose one or the other.
All right, and then Liberty, How the Revolutionary War Began with Ms. Strupek and Sweeney. How does this kind of help the kids prepare for that end of the unit goal?
Well, this one, it really focused on the colonist side of it more so than giving the British side of the argument. It's very, very detailed. There's a lot of information in it, but it has a lot of illustrations, very kind of cartoon in nature, with the captions underneath that kind of give them even more information to pull extra details from. It's referred to throughout the unit. They go back and use this and compare it to different poems and different things that they're reading. So they do use it constantly, but it really kind of helps develop, I guess, more so the Patriot side of what their reasoning was.
Yeah, just to add on to that too, Like, it kinda, like, where we start out in that book is is stuff that we talked about, again, in social studies. And it's basically every grievance that the colonists had, there's a section devoted to those grievances.
And it
So-
seemed like it went like more into detail than
It does.
we
Yes,
did the
it does.
stamp act
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the social studies, but this one,
This,
they
right.
have the part about being the death head stamp, and they kinda get very specific with each like step.
And
of the
they do
grievances.
give like more detail than we
Yeah.
did in social studies, cause I remember in my section, the Paul Revere, we never talked about Paul Revere in social studies, or
Right,
maybe
yeah.
briefly talked about him, and then there's a whole section dedicated, and there is a section in there
It's
about
a
him
very
as well.
engaging text too.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
I agree.
In
It's
this
like-
one, the one thing I noticed about the text, the structure, is that it had side notes on the side that
Yes.
usually are humorous, and the kids, I thought, are really they grab a hold to the things that are in humor. And so but it teaches them something important just in a humorous way, and they always remember those things. So I thought that was gonna be important to the detail that they're able to include at their final writing, because because of the structure of the text, how it's set up.
And I know text structure is one of the kind of the overarching standards that goes with this, that they're gonna struggle with. And a lot so, cause they look at they look at the illustrations, they don't always read the captions.
Right.
Those might stick with them a little bit better. Alright, and then those rebels, John and Tom.
So we discussed, this, so I have, for this particular book, it focuses like on, a different viewpoint of their lives and seeing them differently and more detailed about them. When we get down to the particular section where we get to section 3 with lessons 7 through 12, it kind of leads them, gives them just more information to gather from sources to develop their argument, basically. But when we get, I think it's a little further down too as
So
well.
this one would be for like the debate.
The debate.
Okay.
Yeah, to get just a different viewpoint of their lives and just kind of looking at them differently and seeing, even though they are both considered, rebels, they both have their own lives that show different things about them.
And I think the debate's gonna be the first one we've done for units, right?
Yeah.
We've not had that before. And I know looking at the 5th grade units, that's something that they almost start out knowing. So this will be a good little
Oh, that's
precursor to
kinda
them
nice,
ending, cause I think in at least 2 of the 3 units that we're doing, they have some sort of a debate. Or
I know-
they have to choose a side and not, like you said, not be on that neutral side.
I know this sounds like a silly thing, but the fact that all of the names were so similar back then makes it very difficult for
John.
young kids like
John and
this
Paul.
to just, like, which ones are which, King George or George the Third, or George Washington, King George or George Washington. I mean, it makes it hard, and then Tom, and then they go back and they'll like John Adams, and then they're taught John Hancock, and
You
then
also
where
had
was that
Samuel
at?
Adams.
Yeah.
Samuel Adams, and they're all so familiar that, I thought that maybe as they get older, they'll go like, oh, like maybe that will come to them, but right now they're still trying to section off in their brain, like, who's who and who they go with.
Maybe like a little cheat sheet too.
Yeah.
This is who this
Like a
person
graphic
is.
source, just to help them, like, to remind, to
All of
remember the
the
people.
yeah.
Katie's trunk.
This book really is a turning point for the students because it's a historical fiction. It's about a little girl, she is the narrator, and her family are loyalists. And so it's told from the loyalist point of view. And up until this point, they've really hit a lot on the patriots and the colonists. So, the soldiers come in and the patriot soldiers come in and the loyalists are having to deal with that. So it's a lot of backlash on the family. Really changes their views. What's really interesting about this is there's 3 lessons for this book, and they actually have a mini debate during the 3rd lesson. So that will help with the big debate at the end. And again, I really foresee a lot of them, because of the way the book was written, you want to be on little Katie's side, and so now they're having to really weigh, do you want to be on Katie's side, or do you really want to be the loyalist? So I think it definitely gives you some good text analysis there and character analysis as well, so.
And if you
different
think back,
viewpoints.
if you think back to the lesson, that there's a lesson where they analyze the cover of.
Yes.
Yes.
You have this- there- you look at it and the faces, the facial expressions where they're analyzing lead them that that's a
Yes.
negative.
And this
And
is
this
a
is a
positive.
positive.
And the neat thing about this is, at least I did when I read it, was that the Loyalist family, they have a friend who's a patriot, and the friend is actually the one that kind of steps in and saves her. She climbs into an old wedding trunk to hide from the soldiers. And so it shows that even though they're on opposite sides, even though they have different choices, they're still people and they still can have that compassion and caring. So it definitely has a kind of a feel-good element with it too. So then it really throws them, because then they really, neither side is portrayed as bad, neither side is portrayed as good, so it kind of
And in social studies, we
should
talked
be
about the
interesting.